with the minister's direction, he doesn't want people gathering in groups. Obviously with your family right now, that's no problem at all. Like, we don't have any issue with you being with your family. It's just when other people are getting involved and you're having people gathering groups, it says don't gather in groups more than 2 unless you're with a family.
So I don't know what group am I gathering with?
Sorry?
What group am I gathering with? I'm here by myself.
Victor, when you're all wearing the same things and you're all going to the same location, it's obvious you're in the same group.
It doesn't matter what it looks like. I mean, I'm here am I here with anybody else? I mean, is it against the law for people to wear?
You're here with your family.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm allowed to be here with my family,
Absolutely.
right?
Couldn't agree with you.
Can I just keep exercising then?
You keep exercising.
Okay, thank you a lot. Thank you very much,
Because
Sergeant.
if you start exercising, the others might exercise as well.
Okay, great. Well,
Right,
maybe if
that's what you think
I
you're
don't
doing.
need to talk to you, I can keep exercising.
Go.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not holding you here, whatever.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Sergeant Davey.
I'm warning you one more time. You've been given an official move-on direction from the Sydney City CBD. You have not complied. I'll give you one more warning.
My name's Senior Constable Barnsley. You're under arrest for failing.
Behind your back.
Why are you taking
Up this way.
City Council, thanks for outstanding and no complaint.
Do not resist, otherwise you'll be dealt with accordingly. Do you understand?
I'm not resisting at all.
Anti-social
Why am I being
distancing
moved on?
across the
Explained it
Sydney
numerous times.
Get in the car. Do not move.
Victor! Film Victor. No worries, that's fine. You just want to chat to Victor? You don't want to go past here? You can chat to him to the car, I don't care.
I'm causing fear and alarm, supposedly, but it stopped me from exercising. Now I'm arrested. They've arrested me for exercising.
So a couple of days ago, somebody sent me through a video that I found very familiar, and you'll understand why in a moment. But when I watched it, not just the scenario, when I watched it, I had to go back and look at the Facebook page. It was from a page called Exercising My Rights. Check it out. And when I looked at it and watched a number of his videos there, I understood that there was something I personally hadn't thought of, and I thought was quite clever. So today, joining me, and thank you very much, is Victor Tay, who runs that page and that site. It's exercisingmyrights.com. Victor, thanks for joining us.
How you doing? It's good to be here.
So tell us firstly, what is Exercising My Rights?
Well, exercising my rights, it's basically showing people a way to express their opposition to the lockdown laws, but without actually breaking them. And actually, in New South Wales, of course, at least, because I know those rules the best. It's
a play with words, so it was to exercise your right to protest, but to also exercise your right to exercise under those lockdown rules. So you were essentially using the rules of exercising. Tell us a bit about it, how it works.
Right. So we're actually exercising our right to exercise, because with the lockdown laws, they've actually made it illegal to exercise your right to protest. But now, fear has overcome reason. And these lockdowns have stripped us of our basic liberties in an unprecedented way. And if you don't consent, you can't even exercise your right to protest. But the laws in New South Wales do allow me to go out and get some exercise. So, that's what I'm going to do. While these lockdowns are in effect, every Saturday from 2 to 4 p.m, I'm going to exercise by walking around our state Parliament House. Now, I want to make sure I get a full body workout. So to work out my arms, I'll be carrying this. The main issues we wanted to bring attention to were, with exercising my rights is, the potential deadly effects of the lockdown, the unreliable coronavirus data guiding public policy, and, the infringement on our God-given rights from government overreach. So back in the day, I never really paid attention to the coronavirus in the early days. I assumed it would just be, hype and then be forgotten about, like every other pandemic before it. But, I take an interest in how economies and how markets work. So when the government started implementing the really draconian measures, beside it, being a blatant infringement on our God-given rights, I knew there would be like a huge impact on people's lives and people's livelihoods. So, as when it got to the point when you could no longer have a large, public gathering, that's when it really impacted me the most personally, because now it was illegal to have church gatherings. So we got together in church with a couple of the men and to discuss sort of what options we had moving forward. And the discussion led to, well, you can't even protest these lockdown laws because they've effectively made them illegal. So, but then we thought, well, but technically the lockdown laws allow us to exercise. So you could exercise with a sign. And, if we planted that thought, amongst people, it may spark a trend and a movement which would have the effect of a protest, but it would still, be within the guidelines of the public health order. So I think the first time I went to the city was maybe the second week of April. And the first 3 Saturdays I went to the city, we were a little concerned that police would stop us, but we didn't get any trouble from the police at all. And there were countless police that had driven past and walked past, and we'd waved to them, and we were pretty much ignored for the first 3 weeks. The 4th week was when a few people had actually come to exercise as well. And I think it's because it was just me and my mate the first 3 weeks, and with our families that were in the city. It wasn't really causing much of a crowd or a stir or anything like that. But on the 4th day, there was a few people that came that all dressed up like me, right? They all had white shirts. They all had signs. And I think that's what caught the attention.
They have that thing around their head, the sweatband, your famous now sweatband.
Yeah.
Sweatband.
At this point, what I'm seeing is not exercise.
Here's the relevant section in the lockdown laws. As you can see, the law doesn't specify what you can or can't wear when you exercise, or what you can or can't carry. Plus, the reason someone chooses to exercise doesn't change whether they are in fact exercising or are permitted to exercise. Maybe I am exercising so I can hold a sign in public to express my opposition to these draconian lockdowns. Someone else might be exercising to spend more time with someone whom they have a romantic interest. There are all sorts of reasons why people exercise. The fact of the matter is, exercise is a perfectly valid reason to leave your home according to the lockdown laws in New South Wales.
Because people are exercising. This is exercise
We
equipment.
just got
You
here
can't be
and we're
exercising.
actually exercising. We're actually
Yes.
exercising.
Why are you
Here's the
down at
thing,
Macquarie
it's
Street?
essentially
Any
exercise.
reason?
And for
To
me,
exercise.
You're going to go to the park?
my
It's a scenic
personal
location. We
opinion,
like to
and
exercise
I
in scenic
think
locations.
the Minister of Health would agree with me, is that the essential travel to come here and exercise is a bit of a stretch.
Again, the law in New South Wales doesn't specify a distance from your home that you are permitted to travel to exercise.
Well,
Thanks,
I mean, what? So now we just need to be confined to our own suburb.
You need Parliament House. Is that a reason?
perfectly
Is there a reason
reasonable.
Well,
you
it's
need
a
Parliament House?
very lovely building, isn't it?
Yeah, you need Parliament House.
Okay. I
6
just,
Macquarie Street.
can I ask you a question? Why was it essential for you to come here and exercise?
Because we're going to anybody can exercise at Parliament House.
Mate,
Is it against the law to exercise at
it
Parliament
seems
House?
obvious that you're here to protest in front of
Well, you're
Parliament
wrong.
It doesn't matter.
You're
It doesn't
making
matter.
false assumptions.
It doesn't matter what you think. And that's when they gave the move on direction to them. And I knew that there were only certain reasons that they could give a move on direction. So when we asked for the reason, they used the fear and alarm reason. And that's where you see that sort of the gasps of disbelief in day 4. But eventually,
Well, I've had a lot of experience with move-on laws, and it's one of the techniques that they've used.
Are the laws the
countless
same in
times.
Victoria? Is it similar? Or is it...
I don't know. I haven't read your legislation, but I'd had enough. I'd had enough of being moved on from different protests where I was doing my job as a citizen journalist. When police come up to you and assert that power, you think that they know what they're talking about. And then I went and spoke to my lawyer and I said, listen, this is happening to me every single protest. And they're often moving me on, not because I'm some sort of threat. In my case, it was that I was in danger of others becoming violent towards me. So then they moved me on, and my lawyer ended up printing out the legislation to tell them exactly what to say, to tell me exactly what to say and what to say to them. And I stumped them. They tried to charge me and I had to drop all the charges. And right now I have an open case as well, which that's where we're going with here is, so you were arrested under the fear and alarm, is that right?
Yeah, so in week 4, they had moved my friends on because I told, I knew that, hey, if they give you a move on, even if it's unreasonable, they could technically still arrest you, right? So some people don't want to be arrested either way.
Yes, so you actually can get arrested for disobeying the order. So they can,
That's right.
But then you can challenge the charge later. This is the complex part of it. So they could technically arrest you, but for an unjust move on direction.
That's exactly it. So I think a lot of people, they don't really know, and that's why I released a video explaining the experience I had when getting arrested, so that people would know, hey, it's not that big a deal. It's not that scary. But I think most people don't know that.
You can understand,
So
for a lot of people to defend yourself after the fact is very hard. You know, the process is the punishment. I tell that a lot to people all the time, because it's fine. I don't mind getting arrested. That's fine. But you know, then if they follow up with a charge, then you've got to go fight that charge, which costs you about $5,000 to start with, which is probably what you're experiencing now. But at the end of it, if it's something you believe in and that you're right, you will get off it. But it doesn't change the fact that in the moment they arrest you and unlawfully arrest you.
So that's what happened. They moved them on for fear and loss, even though it was unreasonable. They, didn't want to go through the rigmarole of it all, so they left. But when the cops went to deal with me and my mate, who were still exercising in front of Parliament House, they just let us go. So there was a bit of inconsistency there, where they'd moved somebody else on who were doing the exact same things that we were doing. So once they had left us alone, we were walking outside Parliament House, and other people had come to exercise as well, and that's sort of how that day ended. So we just figured, okay, well, they might leave us alone. But then, so the next week what happened is, when I had arrived, they were actually there waiting for me. How can I help you, boys?
Can you just stand still while we have a chat?
Oh.
It's all good, it's all good.
You guys are waiting for me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we just wanted to talk about last week, and kind of, we're not all bad and things like that. We just want to explain what is going on from our side of things, because it's obviously always two sides to the story. We're just, with the minister's direction, he doesn't want people gathering in groups. Obviously with your family right now, that's no problem at all. Like, we don't have any issue with you being with your family. It's just when other people are getting involved and you're having people gathering groups, it says don't gather in groups more than two unless you're with a family.
So I don't know, what group am I gathering with?
Sorry?
What group am I gathering with? I'm here by myself.
Victor, when you're all wearing the same things and you're all going to the same location, it's obvious you're in the same group.
It doesn't matter what it looks like. I mean, I'm here am I here with anybody else? I mean, is it against the law for people to wear?
You're here with your family.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm allowed to be here with my family, right?
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more.
So when I arrived with my family, they came and approached me, and then that's how that video starts. That's that first conversation that we're talking about, where they're asking me, am I expecting anyone else? And I honestly wasn't, because I didn't know, because I had been there for 4 weeks in a row. I thought this idea was so cool, and I just thought, hey, if I could show people a way to express their opposition, and then they realized what was going on, that they would jump at it and everyone would be there. But in the first 4 weeks, every time I go there thinking, has it taken off this week? There's nobody there. Like, that's when I realized, man, people are really more scared than I realized. And even though you give them a way to legally show their opposition, they don't take it either. So I was there that week, and there was really hardly any people at all. There was maybe like less than 20 people had come and were exercising, walking in front of Parliament House.
Now, is everyone practicing social distancing? Are people actually apart, or is it people really close?
No, they were actually apart, but I think what happened was, on that day, because everyone was there and they could see there was other people with signs and whatnot, people were stopping to talk, but not in large groups. Like, they were stopping and two people were talking, but they were all separate. They were socially distanced.
But
it's
if you
just
go
because
to the park and you exercise, you're allowed to talk. And there was no actual legislation that said you can't stop and talk to people in the park when you're exercising, was there?
Exactly. So it's not that you can't stop. People were worried, make sure you keep on moving. But, when you exercise, obviously you can stop and take a rest. If you meet somebody out while you're exercising, you can stop and talk. And, and the funny thing is, if you're down at the beach or something like that and people are running across the park or running on the paths, they're probably more crowded than it was at Parliament House.
I've seen some of the footage from the beaches here in Melbourne where people are exercising, and it looks packed. All your footage they look much smaller groups than anything I'd seen here in some of the main beaches. So Yeah,
I
go
think it
ahead.
just
So what
stood
happened
out a
today?
lot more because there was nobody else around, you know. So it was sort of like this crowd of people that, you know, obviously had gathered for a reason, but you know, we're all exercising in that area. So it stands out a bit more, I guess, in that scenery. There was a whole. If you look in my videos, you see this huge police presence across the road. Right, there's about 8 to 10 or 12 policemen around the place, just watching what's going on, and we're just walking up and down and talking, and it's peaceful, and nothing is really happening. I never really stopped to talk to many people because I generally, when somebody would talk to me, I'd say, hey, let's just walk and talk, and then we'd just be walking up and down, you know, socially distanced, and
So
then be talking.
you were sticking to the idea of exercising throughout it all.
That's right. So there was never any time when the crowd was addressed. There was no chanting. There was just random people every now and then stopping and talking with other people talking. I was always moving the whole time. When people started rocking up to exercise in Parliament House, they were trying to like sort of pick them off one at a time. So you see in my footage where cops are just talking to them all separately, and I think they just tried to scare them off. But the people that were there weren't scared off by it, right? Because they knew they had a right to exercise there. So they just kept exercising. So I think they were waiting until they could justify that this was like a group gathering. So when people were sort of stopping and talking, and even though they were socially distanced, you know, they saw a lot of people stopping and talking with one another. So then they seem to have made their move at that point. That's when I saw them cross the road as a group and sort of make a move. So I sort of thought, well, I better walk and then just sort of intercept them and deal with them first so that, you know, I could have that conversation with them rather than somebody else. So that's where you see my mate running up, and I've already been stopped by them. And the reason why that footage sort of starts with Constable Crass saying, oh, you know, I'm not going to explain this to you again, because I was struggling to get my phone starting to record. So I was deciding, do I go live with this or do I hit record? So I finally hit record. And then that's where that conversation comes in. So he'd already been talking to me for a couple of seconds.
And I do not want to arrest you. It's the last thing I want to do.
Just tell me again. So what's going on?
Victor, I've just told you I'm not explaining myself again. I've been very reasonable here. I just want you to leave the area. I do not want to arrest you. It's the absolute
what law am I
last thing
breaking?
want to do. You are breaking the Health
law?
Minister's direction under the
How?
public health.
I'm allowed to exercise
You
under
are
the
not-
Health Minister's direction.
Okay. Victor, where do you live?
Where do I live? You know where I live. I
know
gave you my
exactly where
details
you live.
before.
You live an hour away from the Sydney City CBD, Victor. Can you please tell me why it was reasonable for you to come all the way out here to exercise?
Is there a law that tells me how far I can travel
There's not a
to
law.
exercise?
But do you not think?
I haven't broken
Do
the
you
law.
not think it's reasonable to exercise at home? You're telling me you
I think
couldn't walk on
I think
a
it's
street
reasonable
at
both
home.
to exercise here and at home.
Well, I think you're wrong, and so do
Well,
the
you
rest
can-
of the police.
So then, you know, that's when they're giving the move on direction. They're trying to say, hey, you know, you've organized a public gathering. And I'm saying, well, I didn't organize a public gathering because I'm just here exercising.
Yep.
And it's no different to a fitness vlogger, you know, putting it online and telling people, hey, this is what I'm doing. And if people want to do the same, I don't have a right to stop them. So that's where you see that interaction between me and the constables. But what happened was, Constable Crow, who's the younger gentleman, he started this move on direction and he was deciding whether or not to arrest me. And then it moves on to the senior constable who doesn't say anything. And then it goes to the sergeant. So then the sergeant takes over and that's when he starts explaining, oh, you know, we're giving you a move on direction because you're breaking the COVID-19 restrictions. And what's odd about that is that the COVID-19 restrictions is not a reason you can actually give a move on direction, right? So he's giving a move on direction. He's saying I'm breaking the COVID-19 restrictions. I'm saying, well, I'm not because I'm exercising. Constable Craft, why am I being given a move on? Don't you have to give me a reason for why I'm being given a move on?
We have a reason you're
What's the reason?
The move on is that you're breaching the COVID.
But I'm exercising. How am I breaching that?
Well, at this point in time, what does this say?
Is there a
What
law?
does your placard say?
It says facts over fear, but is there a law?
What's the other side say?
Is there a law? Is there a law that
Just
says?
before you go any further, my name's
No,
Sergeant Davey, I'm from the Rocks Police
excuse
Station.
me. If
Okay.
is
What
there
was
a,
your name?
is there a law?
What was your name?
Is there a law that says I can't carry something while I'm exercising? Tell me the law
There
that
is
says.
there is a.
What are you
law
allowed
that
to
says-
carry? What aren't you allowed to
Hang on,
carry when
I'm
you're
not getting
exercising?
into a debate, all right? That's not the
Well,
issue.
you're giving me the move
Okay.
on. So what's the
Now,
reason why you're
the
giving
move on
it?
is you've been given a move on direction to leave this vicinity.
What's the reason why I'm
Because
being
you are
given a
not
move on?
complying with the COVID-19 restrictions.
That's not a
Okay,
reason
that
why you
is-
can give a move on.
That is the reason you're not complying.
I am
with it.
complying. How am I not complying with
Because
the
you're
COVID?
protesting with a group of other people.
I'm
in
not
the
with
form
them.
of-
I
in
don't
the
even know
form
who they
of
are.
the
They
disguise
came.
of exercising.
I don't
Now,
even know who they are. So I just sort of stood my ground, just saying, well, look, unless you can give a law that tells me I can't do this, then I'm going to keep doing it. So I think what people have to sort of gather, what I tell people when they're dealing with the police, and my mindset when I was dealing with the police, what they tend to do is they try to ask you questions and try and get you to give a reason why you are doing what you're doing, as opposed
To
to
incriminate yourself so that they have grounds to basically pounce you on for something.
exactly. So their line of
If you
questioning.
give them a reason that they can use as a move on, as a legitimate move on, or if you give them a reason that you are actually breaching those COVID-19, it's just a tactic they use everywhere. We see this in all the protests. We see this at all the events, and it works until somebody like you stands up.
Right. So, yeah. So they're trying to get me to self-incriminate. So basically, what I'm saying is, if you throw it back on them, they have to prove why you can't be there. You don't have to prove why you're there. So that's why you see in the conversation.
You answered a question with a question. Is that what you've done?
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to throw it back onto them because, like I said, they're trying to say, oh, why is it reasonable for you to exercise here? So I don't need to justify.
You know that's a Jewish tactic. I think you told me you're a Christian, but answering a question with a question is very much a Jewish tactic. My mum always
is it?
does.
Well, I guess we're following the Lord Jesus Christ, so that's how he did things. So they try and get you to incriminate yourself. They're trying to get you to give a reason for why you're there, but you need to understand. No, they need to give a reason for why you can't be there. So if you throw it back on them and say, what is the law that says I can't do what I'm doing? So for example, they'll say, well, why are you carrying a sign? Or is there a law that tells me I can't carry a sign?
Well, I can't. Yeah.
Right? So if it's not illegal, then I'm allowed to do it. It doesn't matter why I'm doing it. I can do it for whatever reason I want. It gets to the point where Sergeant Davey, who's the sergeant, he gets distracted by the people that are talking behind me. So then he just starts talking to them. So now he's not talking to me anymore. So I walk away. That's how you see me. I walk past all the police. I come back. The gathering is still there that Sergeant Davey has caused. And then he turns to me and says, hey, you've got to spread out. And I said, well, I was spread out from everyone. I was just here walking. And he says, well, he tells me you can just continue to exercising. Because I asked him, was it fine if I just keep exercising here? And then he says, yeah, go. I was never holding you here.
Well, when we started talking to you, you were on your own with your son, Simon.
Yeah, well, it's because they come to watch you talk to me. So I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know what the problem is. So, can I just keep exercising
You
then?
keep exercising.
Okay, thank you a lot. Thank you very much,
Because
Sergeant.
if you start exercising, the others might exercise as well.
Okay, great. Well,
Right,
maybe if
that's what you think
I
you're
don't
doing.
need to talk to you, I can keep exercising.
Go.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not holding you here, whatever.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Sergeant Davey. So I'm a little confused at this point because first they're giving me a move on, then they were detaining me, they're questioning me, and then their sergeant says, well, I was never detaining you here to begin with. And even at one point in the conversation, he says, well, you're just standing here. And I say, well, I'm standing here because you guys stopped me. So that's how that ends. After that, I thought that was the end of the day because I thought, okay, they tried their big thing to get rid of everyone, and it was pretty much near the end of the day already, near close to 4 o'clock. I distinctly remember saying goodbye to Renee because, obviously I had spoken to Renee while we were walking and talking there. So she told me, hey, she's leaving now to go home. So I'm like, hey, I'll see you later. So I thought she had already left. So when I was walking and talking with people on the southern side of Parliament House, I all of a sudden hear somebody calling my name and there's screaming going on. So I look over, and then when I look towards to the southern side of Parliament House, I realized that the police had made a barricade. So that's where you see me walk up. And at this point, the camera, obviously when you look back into the camera, you can see what's going on. But at the time, I couldn't really make out what was going on in the distance. So I had no idea who was getting arrested. I thought women were just screaming, and maybe my first assumption was maybe a guy had, spoken with police and then gotten a bit aggressive.
So this is now to that scenario of that viral footage of that other woman, Renee, being arrested.
That's it. So I at the time had no idea it was a mother getting arrested, but then I heard the people on the barricade going, "Oh, she's got a baby and everything." So I'm like, "Oh, I can't believe you guys are arresting a mother."
And that was pretty confronting footage in itself. So what happened then? In a moment, I'll ask you questions to tie that all up.
Yep.
But how did it end up that you were arrested?
Right. So, when I was looking at over there and I knew a mother was getting arrested, I at the time my thought was, man, that was meant to be me. Like I was meant to be getting arrested for anybody that got in trouble. But because they had made the barricade, I thought, hey, well, maybe if they didn't see me cross the road and go, I could at least get to the other side of the road to see what was going on and start the live footage so people could see what was happening. So I went back the other direction away from the barricade to cross at a traffic light. So I crossed at the traffic light. There was me and I think there was a couple of other people doing it as well, if I remember at the time. We crossed the road. We were running down the other side of the road to get closer to where Renee was, being pulled into the car. But as I was running down the road, Constable Clark comes off the barricade with Senior Constable Barnsley, and they intercept just me out of everyone walking on the other side of the road. And that's just when I hit go live.
I'm warning you one more time. You've been given an official move on direction from Sydney City CBD. You have not complied. I'll give you one more warning.
My name's Senior Constable Barnsley. You're under arrest for failing.
Behind your back.
Why are you taking
Up this way.
Turning off City Council for outstanding and non-complaint
Do not
international
resist,
premise.
otherwise you'll be dealt with accordingly. Do you understand me?
I'm not resisting at all.
Anti-social distancing across the
Explained it numerous times.
Get in the car. Do not move.
And then that's when they basically put my hands behind my back and told me to get into the paddy wagon. So
you're under arrest for what at that stage?
Well, at that stage, they were saying it was failure to comply with their move-on direction, which I was under the impression that was no longer in effect because the sergeant had allowed me to continue. Can I just keep exercising?
You keep exercising.
Okay, thank you.
How long were you held for?
Well, I think I got there at about 4 o'clock, so I got into the stage. So once they threw me into the paddy wagon, they made me take my shoes off. Then they got out, they searched me, and they tried to question me more as well. So they were trying to get me to admit that I had organized a gathering and everything, and I just maintained, no, I was just here to exercise. Then they took me down to the station, and I was there for about 4 hours. I think I got in at 4 and I got out about 8:30.
And what were you charged with? Or were you charged?
I was charged, yeah. I was charged with failure to comply with a move-on direction. So I've got a court date in July sometime. And
you're fighting it?
I am. I do plan to, but I've never actually been to... I don't have as much experience as you, Avi, going to court. So this will be my first time ever going to court. So that's why I'm getting...
I can happily help you. Where can people support you, firstly? Obviously, fighting these kind of charges, it costs money. How do people support you?
Yeah, well, once I figure out how much it's going to cost me, I'm going to...
we'll talk about that after.
Yeah, put it on Facebook and then they can support me there.
So you're gonna fight this charge. So it's one charge you've got. Have you got a fine as well for breaching COVID-19?
No, I wasn't fined at all. So I wasn't fined for breaching COVID.
So it's solely on. So even so the police agree that you haven't breached any COVID-19 rules.
Yeah, it seems that from the fact sheet that they gave me, it's mainly based on me organising a public gathering and that public gathering causing fear and alarm in the current environment. And but that's the justification.
The public gathering would have been a breach of COVID-19, but they've not charged you with that because they can't charge you with that. This is the interesting part that we find in all these sorts of cases, and I would certainly tell you to fight it, and I think people should get behind you. People will get behind you just because of that one fact. It doesn't matter if they agree with your political position. It's a tactic that can't be used to silence people. Now, I've got a few questions. I know that there's people that there are people out there that will say that why are you not just complying with the COVID-19 rules at the moment? Why do you feel the need to do this?
Right. Well, like I said, I didn't see too much deal with coronavirus. When it became a big deal, that's when I started looking into it. And when I started realizing that the data actually guiding public policy. Like the data that they're using to actually make the decisions regarding coronavirus is really misleading. Like, for example, this is why I ask people, like, why do you even believe the coronavirus is deadly to begin with? I mean, you think it's more contagious and more deadly than the seasonal flu, but the reason why people think that is when the World Health Organization came out with their initial numbers and declared it a pandemic or whatever, they said that the mortality rate of coronavirus was 3.4% compared to the 0.1% of the seasonal flu. And then it was, it's so deadly, let's shut everything down because millions of people are going to die. Well, what they don't tell you, though, is that 3.4% was actually based on a case fatality rate, like a crude fatality rate. So what that is that's the percentage of deaths divided by the confirmed number of coronavirus cases. But when they compared it to the 0.1% for the seasonal flu, they used an estimated case fatality rate. So what that is they estimate how many people that they don't know about as well may be infected with the flu, and then you use that to calculate the death rate. So I just found that completely misleading. And then also when a lot of experts were coming out, speaking out against the data, speaking out against the lockdowns, add to the fact that I know economically this will be devastating to people and will lead to deaths as well as the fact as the lockdowns being a complete and blatant infringement on our God-given rights. That's why it came to, well, how do we speak out against this? We can't even organize a protest. Well, here's a way we can do it legally and hopefully it catches on.
Are you saying that coronavirus is not dangerous at all? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not saying it's not I think it should just be treated like a seasonal flu. If you look at the studies done by Dr. John Ioannidis, I mean, when he actually did a serology study in California and also the Bakersfield doctors as well, but more people are talking about it. But I think John Ioannidis's expertise and study is the best, where he actually sampled a random sample in California to look at the actual, to actually study the infection fatality rate. And he concluded from his studies that it's no different to a bad seasonal flu. So the way we deal with a seasonal flu, like a bad season of seasonal flu, should be really the same way how we deal with the coronavirus.
And so how would we deal with it?
Well, the way I think it should be dealt with, and this is obviously just my personal opinion, I think, we should protect the elderly and protect the high risk by, encouraging them to self-isolate. So like I have on my sign, you quarantine the sick. So it's the people that are either sick, high risk, elderly. If they self-isolate, that's how we can protect them. But you let the rest of healthy society get back to work and exercise their liberties as they have. And because the risk of them dying from it, just like the seasonal flu, it's fine if it's contracted within the healthy population, and then the healthy population will build the real herd immunity, right? That will protect those that are in isolation. And once it's sufficiently gone through the population, then the sick and the elderly and the high risk and the immunocompromised can come out. And this is really what Dr. Knut Witkowski is promoting, that idea.
But what would you say to people who think that, okay, maybe it's not as bad as projected? There's lots of ways to analyze the data that we're getting at the moment, especially it fluctuates even between different cities in one country, let alone different countries. But let's say at the end of it all, it does turn out to be much worse than the seasonal flu, like a really, really bad seasonal flu, not just a bad, like it is a bad mortality rate. What would you say to them? At what point, I guess, does it become worth shutting down society like they have? Is there any point where you would say, no, okay, I understand a lockdown is needed, that is not one that takes on self-responsibility, but takes on the government has to impose it like they're doing now. Is there any point that you think that is necessary?
No, I don't think there is, because I think there needs to be a balance between safety and liberty. So I don't think there's any justification for locking down healthy people, asymptomatic people that because we have God-given rights to liberty. And if you're going to infringe on somebody's liberty, then you need reasonable cause to do that.
If 50% of people died from it, would you reconsider that?
If how many people?
If it was at 50% mortality, would you still say that?
Yeah, I would, because I think, like I said, it's people have to decide for themselves whether they self-isolate, right? Like, and I think it can get to the point where if somebody, like for example in the Bible, right? In the Bible you have people with leprosy. So it can get to the point where there can be a disease or an infectious thing where if somebody has it, they have the symptoms, they can be forcibly quarantined, right? So I think there is a point where an individual can be quarantined, but I don't think you can ever justify quarantining the whole country. Yeah, like healthy people.
Let me see
so
if I get this
people who are
argument.
healthy should have the right to choose their level of risk,
Okay,
even if they know there's something out there. Yeah.
Yep, so to get the argument straight, you'd say that there is no point in which they can lock up healthy people. It should always be their decision. They just need to, I guess, educate themselves and analyse the data themselves. And if they feel too nervous to go out, then they self-isolate. And if they're in a higher risk, they self-isolate. The only time the government can impose isolation is when somebody is sick.
That's right. So if they can reliably and scientifically show that it's like a 50%.
Can we force testing?
Yeah. I think it's. I guess I haven't really thought so much about that. I think it would be
challenging these ideas because I agree with you.
I guess it would be like
agree with you.
It would be if you think about it like drunk driving, right? So if somebody if a police, and I'm just sort of going off the cuff here now, but my thoughts would be like it's like with drunk driving. If somebody is like walking all groggily and swaying all over the road, then the police have a reasonable cause to test them to see if they're drunk. But if somebody has no there's no symptoms, they're not coughing, they're not sneezing or whatever, there's no symptoms of that disease, like with leprosy you'd have like obviously skin spots and whatnot. I don't think a person should have to get tested. They have a right not to be tested.
So this is really putting liberty above everything.
Well, yeah, I think if you have a right to movement, somebody can't infringe upon that just because they don't feel safe.
But there'll be people that obviously argue, well, you going out in groups, that puts us all at risk, and you don't have the right to put us at risk. What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say that this is just how the world works, right? Like if there's always risk in life. That would be like somebody saying, well, you can't drive because you might run over me one day, or you can never fly a plane because that plane may crash and kill. Life has risks. I say if you are 100% safe, you're 0% free. So this is why we have certain rights that we can exercise and what we have that people just can't infringe upon just because they don't feel safe. If they don't feel safe, they have the right to disengage from society, but they don't have the right to force other people to disengage from society just to keep them safe.
To shut down society. Yeah, I understand. I get that. Now, there's obviously that mother that got arrested, Renee. What is your connection with her? Were you connected, or was she someone that obviously seen your posts and just came?
That's it. Yeah, I have no connection with her whatsoever. I've never spoken to her prior. I met her that day, and I was actually very shocked that she got arrested because, when I spoke to her, she was quite calm. She even spoke to Sergeant Day. And you need to understand, like, her interaction with O'Donnell, who was the duty officer, the inspector that was on duty there, that wasn't her first encounter with the police. She had already been approached prior to some of the constables and questioned. Then O'Donnell questioned her. And I think that second encounter with O'Donnell is really what sort of made O'Donnell come after her, right? Because she kind of shut her down in front of all the constables.
Oh,
then
100%. That was pride.
You are not being detained. I'm free to go.
I am asking for your name because I do believe you're committing an offence. Do you understand that?
I'm not committing a crime. I'm being detained.
I understand.
Am I being detained? No. Thank you. Have a beautiful day. Thank you I hope that you're all here supporting and caring for us. Maybe you guys can carry a sign too. I'd love to. Okay?
I am going to be asking permission to arrest you. Okay?
Did you notice how at first the officer tells the woman that she's not under arrest? Then, not even 10 seconds later, she says she's asking for permission to arrest her. What changed in that time? The threat didn't become any greater. In fact, the woman posed no threat and was being extremely polite. Okay,
yeah, and you can tell from the footage, right? You can tell that it's she's after
you. Watch it, even you could see she hit her pride. So you don't know her. Now, there were some of the criticisms that people were giving I saw online is, firstly, bringing children to a protest. Now, you had your children there, is that right?
Yep. I had all 5 of them
What would
there.
you say to those? How many?
I have 5 children and 1 on the way.
How old
So
are
my
you?
pregnant wife was there too.
How old are you?
I'm 34. 34.
You're my age, and you got 5 children. I can't imagine.
Well, there you go. Are you married, Avi?
Okay. I've got a couple of children, and it's tough enough, good enough for me.
Okay.
But when's your wife expecting?
In August.
So what would you say to people that condemn you for putting them in that scenario? Were they running with you? Were they doing the exercise with you?
Yeah, they were walking up and down in front of Parliament House as well. Well, you know,
Okay,
I guess you don't. I didn't expect it to get violent. You know, like so. I guess if I was going to a protest or to an event that I was expecting to be violent, you know, that was very crowded, and you know, like let's say you went to a very divisive issue protest, and you knew there was going to be anti-protesters there, and they were it was very heated. You know, I probably wouldn't bring my family there. But you know, if you think about it, like the last 4 weeks that we've been going there's nobody in the city. There's hardly anybody really rocking up to exercise. We're just walking up and down in front of Parliament House. We're not engaging with the public.
What did you tell your kids you're doing? What did you tell your children you were doing?
No, my children know exactly what we're doing. Like we're going there to exercise and express our opposition to the lockdowns. I don't keep things from my children. I mean, as long as they're old enough to understand, I just explain it to them. So my oldest son definitely understands why we're there.
How old's your oldest?
He's turning 9 this month.
Oh, wow. Yeah. He'll absolutely understand it then. Yep.
Yeah. So we were just going to walk there, and like I said, we hardly talked to the people there either. It was just walking up and down. It's you know, if I wanted to release a video just showing more footage of what was going on that day, just to sort of set the scene, because when you're watching my live and I've sort of cut it so that it's when I'm talking, it seems like it's happening more than it actually is. But when you're actually there on the day, like obviously you would know that as well, right? Like when you actually record your interviews and everything, and you're there on the day, it's probably less exciting than once you cut the footage together.
Absolutely. People always say, "Oh, why didn't you put the whole?" I'm like, you don't want to watch the 2 hours of me at the event. I'm giving you the highlights.
That's it. So that's the environment, and I think, and Renee actually, she says it in her interviews as well, but she actually expressed it to me too, to say, you know, she that's the first thing where she's always ever gone to sort of express her opinion against something. So she's not like this. She told me she's never been to a protest before. She's never been to anything else before. She specifically tried to do what I was doing because of how it was being done. It was just a walking up and down. Do you know what I mean? So that's why she sort of came along to that. That was she expressed to me.
The media did portray it as a bit of an anti-vaccine and 5G kind of conspiracy theory.
Did
protest.
they? Yeah, that was because of the Sunday guys.
Are you an anti-vaxxer and 5G? Do you think there's a correlation between 5G and coronavirus?
No, I think these are all separate issues. I can see where there's a link between, you know, mandatory vaccinations and sort of the scare around coronavirus and things like that. So I can see how they are relevant.
But you're not anti-vaccines in general.
Well, I personally do not vaccinate my children, so I don't know whatever label you want to throw on that. But you know, I personally don't vaccinate. I just think there are better ways to build a healthy immune system. But ultimately, I think people should just have freedom of choice. I think when it comes to medical decisions, people should be able to decide, you know, what level of risk they take. But I'm definitely against mandatory vaccinations, because I think, you know, either making them mandatory or coercing people financially into making medical decisions, I don't think is right. But, you know, what I'm doing with exercising my rights is mainly just about opposing the lockdowns and the effect of the lockdowns and the
So it has nothing to do with the vaccines and has nothing to do with the 5G.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, but I welcome those people, because it's a sense of, you know, well, you can come together on a single cause. You don't have to agree on everything.
You don't have to agree with everything that they believe.
Yeah, exactly. And when it comes to, I don't really know much about 5G. I mean, I know people that are like have concerns, but I personally haven't looked into it. I don't really know much about it. I don't really have a strong position for or against. But I do think that if there is enough concern out in the community, because it is something that could affect everybody, I think it's something that should be discussed, you know, at length in Parliament. I don't think it should just be rolled out without discussion if people are concerned.
So in essence, I actually fully support what you're doing. I think that people need to take more personal responsibility, and it is not up to the government to impose restrictions to protect me. Because I'm an adult, I can protect myself. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm minimizing the dangers of this virus. In fact, my mother's cousin died from this virus. So it is serious. I think it's serious, and I don't think you need to downplay the virus in order to justify you wanting to stand for your rights, and that's why I support it. But when you say something like the mortality rate at 50%, I think that's where we may disagree. I think that in the case that if there really was a virus killing that many people so quickly, then I'd understand if the government had to do something quickly, react quickly to kind of get ahead of it and understand what's going on and to protect us as a civilization or as a country or whatever. But that's not the case. You know, you can
but
look
think
at the
about
data.
it. Right? Like even if there was a virus that had a mortality rate of 50%, you probably wouldn't want to go outside either. So you still don't need the government to tell you what to do. You know, if people heard, there's this, because the government can inform everybody and say, hey, look, we think that it is. And if people decide to go, I'm not taking this risk, I'm staying inside, then that's fine. But it's when they remove the right for people to say, you know what, I either don't believe what the government's saying, or I'm willing to take the risk because I have a greater risk of not providing for my family or whatnot. I'm going to go take the risk. So people should be allowed to decide what level of risk they take. But when the government decides the level of risk you take, what they end up doing is removing your liberty. And like I was telling you before, like it may not even apply to somebody. Like why should some farmer on some secluded farm somewhere can't go to the local shops of somebody he knows doesn't have the disease? Whereas when these just broad brush lockdown laws get put into place, it's affecting them as well. And it's completely unreasonable. So I think when it's like a free market, it's like if people can make up their own decisions, their own level of risk, then it's fair for everybody. But once you have bureaucrats making decisions for everybody, then that's when you get overreach, that's when you get oppression, and you get these draconian sort of measures. Most reasonable people would say if there's legitimately something out there that has a 50% kill rate and it's verified, and they've seen it, and then that's why people, think about it now, right? Some people now are not going outside because they're scared, even if they're not forced to. Like businesses now are putting all these policies in place and sending their employees home even when they didn't need to. So the government didn't have to tell companies to do this for them to take care of their people. But then what happens is when it becomes a law, now the businesses that need to take those risks to survive are now unable to. They're unable to exercise that freedom to continue to work if they choose to take the risk.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, let me ask you, let's say that they dropped all the lockdown laws, but they only implemented social distancing rules. So the rules of social distancing at the moment. So, for example, everybody can go out. It's your choice if you stay home or go out, but you have to keep 1.5 or 2 meters away from each other. Would you support that?
No, I wouldn't. Because first of all, with every law you pass, you need a way to enforce it. Right, so that's why if you pass a law but you can't enforce it, that's why people start getting into surveillance and all that sort of stuff, where they're trying to watch us and track. Because how would you even enforce social distancing? Like if you say, okay, it's illegal for you to shake hands with somebody, are you going to have a cop looking over your shoulder every day, seeing whether you touch somebody else and then who else? So I don't think it would be practical, and also it'd be an infringement on your liberty. It's the same. It's just the same principle in a different scenario. So the principle of, they can't tell you whether you can leave your home or not. You can take the risk. They shouldn't be able to tell you whether you can shake somebody's hand or not, hug somebody. You decide whether you want to take the risk.
Forget about you choosing to shake someone's hand. The case that you want to go outside and you go, all right, it's my right to go outside, so I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go to the shop. But then people coming into your space putting you at risk, and you don't want that. That's a bit like if you think that if the virus is that deadly, let's just, for argument's sake, say it is that deadly. So somebody coming into my space is basically swinging a baseball bat at me. We have laws against swinging baseball bats at people, so why can't the same thing apply here?
Well, that's where I think that's where it may come where there's discretion, right? Where if you have a disease, it's like people, I guess, with sexually transmitted disease. I think it's a felony, isn't it? If you are shown to purposely be transmitting it to other people. I'm not
sure,
Is
but
it-
I'd
is it?
imagine so. I'd hope so.
Yeah, you'd hope, like if somebody had AIDS, for example, and they're going and having sex with people and spreading it intentionally, that can be a malicious act. So I think if somebody had it and it can be shown they knew they had it, or and it was like this, and it truly was this deadly disease, and then they go out in public. So I can see how that could be a crime, because I'm not completely against, like I said, quarantining individuals. Like you see in the Bible, you see the leper being quarantined against his will and then being tested every 7 days to see whether he's allowed out and whatnot. So I think there is a precedence to be able to quarantine somebody that has something that's legitimately infectious and deadly. It only comes to like public spaces, right? Because obviously somebody can't trespass on your home, so you can stay home. When it comes to businesses and private property, the business owner can decide what level of risk they're willing to take and the litigation around that and whatnot. But when it comes to public spaces, I guess it would come down to, the scenario of, hey, a court deciding.
So like, I want to go out. I want to go to the park, but I don't want you to put me at risk by coming too close to me. Where do we draw the line there? That's the balance here. That's what I'm just trying to get my head around, because I do agree with you. I think that we, as a society, we need to take more personal responsibility. I think people who think that out of fear they're giving the government all the power, they don't realize that at the end of this pandemic, and there will be an end to this pandemic, whether it's in 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, there's going to be an end. Now the question is, at the end of that, what are we going to be left with in terms of our civil rights, our liberties, our human rights? What's going to be, whatever they have not going to have.
What'll be this new normal, right?
Yeah, what's going to be this new normal? What people think that you look at New Zealand. New Zealand's a great example, because New Zealand just passed a law that gives police the power now to essentially enter your house without a warrant. And in Victoria and probably New South Wales also, they can at the moment under this state of emergency. But when that state of emergency ends, they can't do it. So it's very limited. Whereas New Zealand passed a law under the current situation. They rushed it through Parliament because, to combat COVID-19. But at the end of it, there's still going to be that law. And anybody who's ever gotten into any sort of situation with police, including yourself just now, you see how they take a move on law and they just try to bend it and twist it to suit what their objective in that moment is. So don't you think if you're passing laws that's going to give police the power to enter your house, and you're going to agree to that as a society because you're just so nervous right now, don't you think when this ends, they're going to abuse that law? It may have been implemented with all the best of intentions. Even that I'm questioning, but maybe it was. Do you not think later down the track that that's going to come and bite you in the bum? And that was all because you were so scared of this pandemic. And that's where I agree with you. So I think that that's the danger we have here. And that's where people need to realize, I think some people will look at you, and it's not really a left or right thing anymore. Some people will look at you and go, oh, well, he's just, a troublemaker who's a bit crazy and he's putting us all at risk, which
I think it's seen that way because people are missing the point. Obviously.
So what's the point?
But they're missing the point that I obviously have an intention to express my opposition to what is going on. But when they see the interaction...
Why can't you do it from home online? That's what they'll say. Why can't you do it from your home? Why can't you do an online protest?
Right.
I'm playing devil's advocate here. I actually agree.
That's fair enough. That question is about, if we talk about just protests in general, why do people do protests at all? Right? Why don't the people that go to protests just try and go on YouTube and do all that sort of stuff? Well, it's because you know, you have to figure out, first of all, you have to have the skills to be able to create the videos that get out there. Then you have to have the networks that are willing to spread it. And then you got to go against the censorship and all that stuff with YouTube and Facebook and whatnot. So I think the reason why protests still occur, even in our technological day and age, is because it's something public and visible that's out there that you reach people that you will not necessarily reach. So it's, you know, it's just one form of like doing a public, what is it called when you just like do some public thing just to garner attention to a certain issue. So a public display or something, a public display. So, you know, obviously this is like a public display to try and get people's attention. The question is, what are we trying to bring attention to? Now, people that are saying, well, this person's just trying to bring attention to themselves, are obviously missing the point, because what I'm trying to bring attention to are the issues, and to also inspire other people to show, hey, you're not the only one that disagrees with these lockdowns. Because people at home are just thinking, oh, am I the only one that's thinking this way? But when they see a protest and they see other people going out and expressing their opposition, then it gives them a bit more courage to go, hey, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that thinks this way, right? So there's that. So when people are saying, well, I'm just going out there to cause trouble, obviously I'm opposing what is going on, and I'm trying to do it in a way that is legal. So this is why there's sort of the smart-assness about it, is because I'm obviously, there's there's something legal at play when I'm talking with the police and how I'm going about it. But, you know, if people get the impression that it's like a protest, well then that's good, because I want it to have the impact of a protest. I don't mind if it looks like a protest, but I want it legally to not be a protest, so that, you know, it takes that power away from them to stop it.
What would you say to those who really feel uncomfortable and dislike what you're doing? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say those people can stay at home and make themselves feel safe, and once, you know, this pandemic is over, then they can come out. But I don't think they have a right to stop us from going out.
So thank you so much for joining us today. People can obviously follow your work at exercisingmyrights.com, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Or they can find me, if your listeners don't know, I pastor an independent Bible-believing church as well in Sydney. So if they want to check out the church, the website's tcil.org.au, so they can find me there as well.
No worries. Thanks so much for your time, mate.
All right. Thanks for having me.
And always remember, muscles are like rights. If you don't use them, you lose them.